Now, the program to help you and your family get fit and stay fit with a biblical foundation without a one-size-fits-all plan. It's Faith Family Fitness with your host, Full Armor Sports and national champion coach, Jason Lupo.
Welcome, this is Faith Family Fitness on 100.7 The Word. I am your host, Jason Lupo, and today I have some lovely, phenomenal guests. Lindsay Moore, who is a local area expert on school policy here in Colorado Springs, El Paso County, and Julie Park, who is an expert in homeschool education and also the founder and operator, head honcho of Great American Outpost. And so those two are joining us today on our phenomenal, very interesting topic of conversation. And this topic of conversation comes from an opinion piece written by John Rosemond in the Omaha World Herald. And John Rosemond says that adults should not high-five children because a child is not an adult's equal. And this has sparked a pretty national-wide debate. And this started a couple weeks ago, and since we've seen this article all over the place, it's popped up on my Facebook, and everybody's got an opinion about this. And so we're going to talk about when it's appropriate to high-five kids, whether or not it's appropriate to high-five kids, and what should we do to help encourage kids, motivate kids, and greet kids. And so that's the topic of today's show. We're going to take a brief time out and then jump right into this fun interview. So join us after this brief time out.
Thanks for listening to Faith Family Fitness, a presentation of Full Armor Sports Teams. Teamwork is at the core of any successful organization. Full Armor Sports, led by national champion coach Jason Lupo, is now registering for school year sports programs. Full Armor is a multi-sport teaching and training organization with homeschool options available. All of Full Armor sports coaches are certified and experts in their field. Full Armor's coaches combine for over 500 years of coaching experience. They will help your kids gain fundamental skills, the concepts of teamwork, essential to being successful throughout their lives. Multiple sports options are available now, from swimming, softball and volleyball, to powerlifting and youth MMA. The faith-based approach to making sports fun and productive are a great choice for your kids at Full Armor Sports Teams. Learn more at fullarmorsportsteams.com.
Welcome back to Faith Family Fitness on 100.7 The Word. Today's topic, is it okay? Should you high-five your children? And this topic is coming because of a opinion article by John Rosemond of the Omaha World Herald, who states, "I will not slap the upraised palm of a person who is not my peer. And a peer is someone over age 21, emancipated, employed, and paying their own way." The 74-year-old columnist wrote, "The high five is not appropriate between doctor and patient, judge and defendant, POTUS and a person not old enough to vote, employer and employee, parent and child, grandparent and grandchild." He argues that that respecting adults is important to a child's character development, and that a high five is not compatible with respect. He says the child who is allowed to high five an adult has permission to talk to said adult as if they are peers. And so that's what sparked this pretty national debate on whether or not we should high five our children. And just to bring in a couple research articles and other viewpoints for us to discuss on this show, and I have two lovely guests today. This is coming out of Frontiers in Psychology, and this is Shannon Zental and Bradley Morris, who wrote an article, "High Fives Motivate: The Effects of Gestural and Ambiguous Verbal Praise on Motivation." And their discussion at the end of this article, which you can find online, it's actually a free peer-reviewed article if you just search that subject line. The study is the first to demonstrate, this is verbatim out of their discussion, this study is the first to demonstrate that ambiguous verbal and gestural praise, i.e. praise without explicit attributions, positively influence motivation. We discussed 2 novel findings. First, explicit attributions appear to be unnecessary for praise to influence motivation positively. Praise without explicit attributions, explaining the cause of success and failure. An example, a yay was as motivating as praise with explicit attributions. You did a good job drawing, more specifically. So here this article is saying that regardless of whether or not you have verbal praise with a high five is still a motivating gesture. And I don't think that we get that same response from something like a handshake. And then in the Journal of Pediatric and Child Health, John Massey has a different opinion, saying that we have all seen the cringeworthy politician's handshake with young children. The natural reaction is that it is just wrong. It just does not work. But I toss this out, though. It is good to explore why the besuited male politician shaking hands with the young child invokes this reaction. He goes on to say that he believes that it's insincere, with incongruity of purpose, and the young child really has no interest. And so this is the debate. The debate is, should we high-five our children? John Roseman saying that it is not congruent with respect. And so I have 2 phenomenal guests here today. And I just want brief, couple-word, no more than 3-word reaction to this story. Lindsay, our phenomenal local expert on school policy. Lindsay, what's your first reaction to this story?
I will tell you, Jason, thanks for having me on, that my first gut reaction to this is part disgust and part laughter, because the way that our children have been treated for the last couple of years in this society is abhorrent to begin with. And then you're going to tell me that you think that high-fiving a kid is wrong. I just think that there's a time and a place for an appropriate high five, and there's a time and a place for an appropriate handshake. And understanding those positions is essential.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And Julie, what's your initial reaction?
Okay, so that was more than 3 words. But so my words are, say what? That's, when I was reading this article, that's all I can think is, what are you talking about? But I have more to say on that.
So I think it's interesting because I look back and you read something like this, and then you stop to think, like, what do you do in an everyday life? And we all teach in some level, right? Lindsay, you have kids. Julie, you have kids. I don't have kids, but I work with hundreds of kids. And so we look back and go, okay, well, what is it that I do? And why do I do it? Right? And I think we brought this up on this show a lot, but sometimes it's just about being intentional about what you do. And so is it the use of the high five on a regular basis that's doesn't show respect? Or I mean, let's start with this question. Why do you think that we've seen a decline in the respect of children for adults to begin with?
Because our adults don't teach our children when it's appropriate to be respectful. Period.
Mm-hmm. Or even how to be respectful. I think that I agree with part of it, right? Just that respecting adults. I mean, that's super important for children and in their development. But the way that he's attributing high-fiving or handshaking and saying that's, one of the signs of disrespect, I think that, that's where I disagree. But what he's saying on respecting adults is definitely an authority, right? We don't have that anymore in our society. And so I think he's going the other extreme and saying that this is one of the causes or this is one of the signs of it. That's where I disagree with it for sure.
Well, and I think we've almost seen the opposite, right? Like back last year when we see these TikTok videos, it became really popular for kids to destroy on purpose their school's bathrooms just to get likes on TikTok. Like as a society, we have completely diminished this parent-student or teacher-student, parent-child relationship. And I think it goes far beyond high fives. I mean, would you agree, Lindsay?
Absolutely. I think this goes back to authority. Whose authority? Is it parental authority? Is it teacher's authority? Who is in authority here? And if you're going to tell me that as a teacher, your students are going to disrespect you because you give them a high five, I should question your authority. Have you taught your students to respect you? Have you taught your students to be respectful? Now, parents' jobs are to teach kids to be respectful to those in authority. And so this goes hand in hand. These two things go together. You can high five your teacher and still understand that they have the authority if you've been taught that. And if your teacher expects that, if your parent or parental figure trains that and teaches you how to do that.
So, thank you, Lindsay. Julie, you greet a ton of students multiple days a week walking in your door at Great American Outpost. How do you choose to greet your students?
I'm a hugger. So I do, and you know what? So this is the thing is I feel like a high five or handshake is like this appropriate way of greeting adults. That there's this level of appropriateness because normally you don't go and hug some stranger or some kid that's, you don't go and kiss them. You're not supposed to sniff their necks and their ears and their hair, by the way. There's an appropriateness, right? But I feel
no
like
sniffing allowed.
No sniffing. But, but when you're greeting, okay, so even a baby, right? One of the very first appropriate touches between a child and an adult that you don't know is a little high five, right? So the kids need to learn that there is a level of appropriateness. Like it's okay to be able to touch somebody, and they need that. They need the human touch of an adult. But is it, you can't go beyond certain boundary, but they're learning this at a very young level. So me, of course, I know my kids, I know the kids who are there. So of course I'm going to give them hugs, right? But if it was a new kid, I would be very cautious about that. So I would give a high five, or I would give okay, nice to meet you, because there is that level of respect, mutual respect. And it doesn't mean that they're, I'm going to be submitting to their authority. That's not what we're talking about. So yeah, no, it's, I'm a hugger. So
I get it. I'm a hugger too. I hug a lot of our kids, and a lot of our coaches hug our kids. And we use high fives, we use fist bumps. I actually don't use high fives nearly as often as I thought I did. No joke. And sometimes, the high five is the fast, like kids walking by and you want to quickly acknowledge them.
Right.
But I'm all about intentionality. And so I actually don't give out nearly as much praise as I'm not like a constant praise guy. I'm a very intentional, I want to spend 4 or 5 seconds. I'm going to put my arm around you, and we're going to spend 5 or 6 seconds talking about what we just did. Mm-hmm. And so that to me is a lot more impactful than just a quick high five. And so when I read this article and I started thinking about it, for me, it's not so much the high five as being disrespectful. For me, the high five in my head when I'm reading this is sometimes we overuse things and they lack intentional value. And so how do we get back to creating that intentional value of a high five? Is it the same as a handshake? So what do you think, Lindsay, about intentional value of a high five?
I think that this goes back to understanding your audience. Let's understand your kids. Let's understand your audience. Let's understand the behavior pattern and where we are and what we are doing. So, for instance, in my classroom, I have a lot of teenagers. I've got a lot of teenagers. They like to be really rowdy. And so for me, I'm intentional with them, and I use specific actions, specific words at a specific time for a reason. I greet the entire class when I walk in with a really joyful sounding greeting. So I say, "Oh, fabulous friends, how are you today? How is everyone?" And they all look up and look at me, and they are ready to go. And the boys especially, they look up and they go, "Oh, this crazy lady, what she got going today?" And so, for instance, it's all about intentionality. It's all about you making an effort to connect and affirm those kids in a specific way that's appropriate at the appropriate time. I'd love to give them all high fives, but I feel like the value of a high five, it increases itself in value when you do use it at a minimum, because they want the praise. They want you to affirm them that they have done a good job. And so when you use it at the right time and in the right way, they understand what it means. This isn't a disrespectful thing. It's not Miss Lindsay. Miss Lindsay is just saying, oh yeah, whatever. They're not going to disrespect me for it. They're going to say, oh my gosh, she put her hand up and said, yes, yes.
Yeah. And I think, it's really an acknowledgement. A high five is an acknowledgement, right? And yes, we can use it like there's a crowd of kids and you're just high-fiving everybody. That's one thing. But what you're saying is, that intentionality, when you do it with intentionality, there is that acknowledgement. And you can see that kids, there's a difference between high-fiving a kid or patting them on the shoulder and saying good job. Like there's you can see it in their eyes, that they like this. And you're, because I feel like there's a level of acknowledgement,
Yes.
And so, yes, we have to use it appropriately and, intentionally. But I feel like we're overthinking it. Like we're in a society now. The thing is, back then in the 1800s, maybe when he was born, it was maybe not appropriate. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
When it wasn't appropriate to be doing that. But the culture has changed, and not necessarily in a good way in some ways. And like, let me say, the disrespect of authority, disrespect of adults, that shift is not good. But the culture has shifted into using a high five to just say, hey, I see you. I acknowledge you. I like you, and this is something that the kids are relating to. And you know what? I feel like, when you have a very strict parent or very strict adult and they're so unapproachable, I felt like when I was reading this, man, like John is not approachable, like I would be like terrified of him as a kid.
Well, he's like the grouchy grandpa.
He's the
that's
grouchy
screaming,
grandpa.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't have to explain this to you. And it's like, is that really going to cause these kids to actually respect you? Or, is it going to create a pseudo respect? Like you're interpreting that as a respect, but they're terrified. It's actually fear. So I don't know. I think that there's that difference. Like we have shifted, and he's not acknowledging that.
Yeah, and I think a handshake, right? Like I don't have the world's largest hands, but I got much larger hands than most of our kids that we see on a regular basis, and a handshake is just like so much more overpowering. And so we've talked about high fives from like an adult-led perspective. Maybe the respect element that we're searching for is kid-led. Maybe that's when we have to start going like, is this really truly respectful? Like if a kid walks up and goes, "What's up, teach?" High five, or even once again, popular TikTok, Instagram, get the likes. Kids are walking around with their camera trying to shoot their teacher's reaction when they call them by their first name. Crazy amounts of videos, kids walking around calling their teachers by their first names. Most would see that as a sign of disrespect. And I think it goes person to person as well, and also situation to situation, right? Like a youth pastor, a coach in different roles, a teacher, we all have different relationships with the kids that we work with. And so it might be more respectful in one situation than another. So student-led high fives, is that disrespectful?
Student-led.
Honestly, it's okay. So this is what I see. I see there's like a fundamental issue, right? Of the heart, of attitudes, of culture. There's a fundamental issue. I don't think it's addressed with a high five. It's not the equivalent of saying this, this high five is equivalent of that. You know what I'm saying? So it's so much deeper, and your question is more fundamental, right? It's so much more fundamental. And he's picking on like that high five or handshake. Whereas for me, like, don't address me by my first name if you're 4. Like that, to me, there are signs, there are things like that where I feel like, yes, we are allowing our kids to demonstrate this disrespect in a way by trying to be all buddy. So he's not wrong that that there's a fundamental issue, but he's focusing on something that I don't agree with his opinion that that's the sign of it. So no, student-led, I think that, definitely, that in their heart or in their attitude, there is definitely a sign of that, right? So in that case, like, we have to be cautious because it's a movement of disrespect, or there's a movement of trying to show like, hey, we're cool and we're going to, there's not a level of
right.
respect
Like we're
there.
best friends over here.
Yeah. Or even like, oh, this guy is just my peer and he's nothing more than my peer, and then that becomes a problem. So yeah.
Yeah, and I could see where also kids coming forward with the way that they want to be approached may lead to a high five, right? Like maybe a kid doesn't want to be hugged. We have kids that don't want to be hugged. We have kids that maybe aren't comfortable with handshakes, and so when you go to address them, they may just lift their hand because that's how they want to be acknowledged. And so I think there's almost a matter of like us respecting the kid as well from that perspective.
I agree. So I'll take this back to a couple of students. In my class, I have 2 students who are extremely shy. Most often they don't make eye contact. Most often they are in the corner of the room, and most often they don't want to participate or be called on. And understanding where these students are in their learning process and how they want to be approached. And this is all situational, right? You have to have situational awareness of where you are, what kind of authority you have, what kind of authority and respect you want to give off to those that you have in your peer groups, right? So like the author of the article was saying, oh yeah, SCOTUS isn't going to high five a kid, or I wouldn't want my kid to high five SCOTUS. Give me a break. There is an entirely different arena in the political, and you behave entirely in a different manner. You're not going to high five SCOTUS. You are going to understand the respectful position of the Supreme Court justice. This is not a high five situation when you're in the political. Okay, let's just break that down. But if you're in the classroom and you have certain kids who are of a different demeanor, you're going to understand they want to be approached differently. And that is your duty as a teacher and as the authority figure to understand that not every kid is going to respond to that. Not every kid is going to like that, or not every kid is going to want that. And so these 2 students are fantastic. And oftentimes walking over there and just bending down to look them in the eye is as effective or more effective than a high five in that situation.
Thanks for listening to Faith Family Fitness, a presentation of Full Armor sports teams. Teamwork is at the core of any successful organization. At Full Armor Sports, led by national champion coach Jason Lupo, a Christ-centered approach to sports fundamentals and fitness has earned his company the respect of athletes and their parents. Full Armor Sports is committed to helping youth in our community experience growth through sports and to strive for improvement and excellence. Further, youth compete as individuals coming together with a sense of teamwork, camaraderie, and support for one another. At Full Armor Sports, the reality is achievements, failures, wins, and losses eventually fade away. But the bonds team members form through competition evolve into relationships lasting forever. Learn more at fullarmorsports.com.
Well, I just want to thank you both for coming on this show. It's been a lot of fun. We could probably continue this conversation for another hour. It's been a blast. Join us next week. We are going to have multiple of our athletes join us on this show. So I have 2 of my athletes coming on. We will ask them the question about high fives as well. I asked them yesterday, and we had a brief little conversation about high fives and whether or not it showed respect. So I look forward to that conversation with my athletes, and it's going to be a blast. If you have missed any of our shows, go on faithfamilyfit.org. You can find all of our latest shows. We are also available on pretty much every podcast subscription channel there is for you to listen in, tune in to our show. If you have questions or you have comments on this topic, you can email info@faithfamilyfit.org, and we will read your questions, answer your questions on this program. We will also potentially read your commentary on this program. So let's get some interaction going, and let's connect with you all and your opinions on critical topics like, should we high five our kids? And so this has been a blast. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you, Julie, for our wonderful program that you guys have contributed to. We look forward to seeing you next Saturday and every Saturday at 9 a.m. on 100.7 The Word. This is Faith Family Fitness, and once again, faithfamilyfit.org. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.
This has been Faith Family Fitness with Coach Jason Lupo of Full Armor Sports Teams of Colorado Springs. Join him at the same time next week for Faith Family Fitness on The Word 100.7.